Hello there, everyone who happens to watch this either live now or later in the week. I'm back. I was gone on Sunday. For those of you who tune in to see me for the news, I was not there for that this week. Was not feeling very well on Sunday, so I sat that one out, and I apologize for not getting a message out there, but I don't think it'll be a huge problem. Relatively speaking, not much has happened in Russia over the last week or so. But we're not here to talk about news today. We're here to talk about music. And yeah, we actually have quite a bit. If I do a quick count, 15, 23. We got 23 albums to go over today. And I'm going to start with something a little bit different, a genre that I don't normally spend that much time with, or one that I almost certainly never start with. And it's kind of the reason why I feel like it's been a strange week, at least for me, when it comes to music. Like I said, I got 23 albums to talk about here. But this week, there was a lot of that music, which is either ambient or classical or even jazzy, genres that typically don't get a lot of releases. And part of them I had built up in my playlist from a week or two back. And then there just were a lot of releases. In fact, I didn't even get through all of them. If you look at the description, you'll see kind of how large my backlog is getting. But that's beside the point. It felt kind of like an odd week in that regard, just because, not to say that this music is bad. It's not. I mean, the stuff that we're going to talk about is good. Some of it's okay. Some of it is something that you might really only listen to on certain occasions or in certain moods. But yeah, just the fact that there was so much of this nebulous type of audio this week, I think was a little disorienting for me. But I don't expect it to happen very often. But it did this week, so we'll just jump right into it. I'm going to go ahead and put the whole screen up. We've got the infinity zoom. And the first album we're going to talk about is this one right here, Limenya or Limenya with, yeah. I'm not even going to attempt to pronounce it. I'm going to, it's like Mneme, I believe, like mnemonic, Mneme. Very muted art. This is a relatively short album, 7 tracks. You can see most of them clock in around 2 minutes or less. And it's neoclassical music. This is a young composer out of St. Petersburg. I believe I'm just going by the album artwork here, so I might be wrong on that. Anyway, the composer is focused on the piano. So the piano is a key instrument on these tracks, but there is no shortage of other instrumentation here. For example, on the track Pinions, you'll hear things like strings and even some woodwinds. But the piano is still ultimately the focal point. If we jump ahead, these are more strings. I don't remember the track that the brass instruments are on, but relatively moving. Although there are tracks like Открытка here where things tend to be kind of as cold and lonely as this album art. So it's a mix. You have some atmospheres like on Pinions, which are rather large and vibrant, I would say. And then you have these airier, more spacey tracks where the piano is still front and center, but much colder. Again, perhaps it's not a surprise that this album or this EP, however we wanted to describe it, was released in winter. There is a bit of that feeling throughout the whole thing. So yeah, if you're looking for something which is well a bit more classical, this is a nice touch, and it's rather short. It's a bit of a sorbet to refresh your palate sometimes. Next up, we've got. I'm going to refresh this page so that the image loads. Bandcamp in Russia does not load all of the images. So here we go. This is by Psor or Sor. Havus, I believe is how we say the name of this. We got 5 tracks here. So we get a little EP. This is lo-fi, as he says, house-like experiments. Uh, this is the type of music at the end of a long night on the dance floor when the feet are still shuffling, but the energy is completely gone. Or it's the same type of energy as when you're just unwinding at the end of the long day, but your head is still kind of, moving back and forth. You're still vibing a little bit. So it's got a different mood. It's almost got an AM radio atmosphere to it as well. House light. I mean, house music, light version of it. Kind of nice. Nice and light and refreshing in the same way as the first album that we looked at. All right. Up next, we're moving on to Samsara Inc. or Incorporated here. Model for Assembler. Now, this is again, we have an EP basically. We have 7 tracks that works out to about 12 minutes long here. While simultaneously, this EP can also last as long as 42 days. And that's because the artist, Samsara Inc., they worked to create 7 tracks which can be played in any order so that they flow together regardless of which order they play in. So you can play them from start to finish, or you can hit shuffle and go through every single mathematical possibly, or every single mathematically possible permutation of this album, which works out to about 42 days. I did the math. And I don't know. I really love it when artists do this. They take something that is relatively short and perhaps on its own not remarkable, but they try to do something with it so that it rewards you or invites you to come back for additional listens. Bit like a choose your own adventure, just with the shuffle button on the album or the EP, I suppose. Wait for the audio to load. The tracks here vary quite a bit too. You have some that are a bit heavier in this end, and there should be some that are a bit lighter as well, if I've got these written down correctly. But again, right, 7 tracks, you could just hit shuffle on them and you'll get something slightly different every single time, but it would become more and more familiar. So I don't know. I guess it's going for that somewhat fractal effect as well, which they have with the album artwork. All right, now the next one here, GTMN with Ethereal, I almost didn't include here. I'm going to talk a little bit about why. Thank you, Yandex. This is one step up from that kind of muzak, right? The background music that you are all familiar with in lobbies and shopping malls. And it's just that really kind of innocuous type of music. And I was listening to this, and it's not bad per se, but I also did a little digging on the artist, and there's only 2 photos of him, I suppose, available. I can't tell either. I'm pretty sure the photos are AI generated, so I honestly am not sure if this music is AI generated, which we've talked about or I've mentioned in the past. I'm not like a huge fan of um, highlighting AI music unless there's a gimmick to it, like I did a while back with the one that was connected to uh, mathematical formulas in programming. Talked about it, I think, 2 weeks ago, or maybe in the first week of doing this. But I left it here regardless. Not sure why. If you do like calm tracks that focus heavily just on like piano and backing electronics that are slightly more involved than the YouTube copyright free backing tracks that you're probably all used to from watching things online. This is basically that. So this is basically the copyright-free music from YouTube, but slightly more involved with it feels like a little bit more thought, which again could be AI or might not be. Um, and again, the only reason I'm assuming that this is from Russia, there's very little information on this artist, and the only information I could find was on Russian sites, which led me to believe as such. But it's you know, it's innocuous. Some people like this type of stuff. I don't hate it. It's again background music. It's the music that you hear on the intro to a YouTube video or an outro or something along those lines, basically. So, although a bit more involved, right? It's not as looping necessarily. It feels like it's a bit more ethereal, right? But yeah, that feels very, very copyright free. Anyway, moving on. I actually listened to 2 albums by this, Volkota, which I'm assuming is how you pronounce it, The Soundtrack of My Autumn and What Happened Before. I have to say I preferred The Soundtrack of My Autumn, and we'll talk a little bit why. Um, this isn't exactly music per se. This is what you would call ambient music or, soundscapes, what honestly, whatever you wanna call it. Um for this type of production, it's not something I listen to often, right? I don't have a problem with ambient music or soundscapes, again, whatever you want to call it. It's just they're too easy to ignore. And sitting down and listening for a dedicated 25 minutes to really get what's going on the track, I typically hate doing. But with the winter being what it is here in Moscow currently, there's this feeling that autumn never really left or that spring has just moved in extremely early. So, with these 2 albums, or works, I suppose, they both use extensive field recordings, right? What is reflected in puddles, there is a lot of sound of dripping and running water. With autumn has come or it can't rain all the time. Well, it can't rain all the time. You can probably guess there's more of that water sound. Autumn has come, well, not in the middle of winter, but there's the sound of like maybe a late September where insects are still going, but it's mostly just the wind. Um, it feels by and large like an audio version of wet gray environments, and it just seemed right to me this week when I put it on and when I started listening to it. Again, it's not something that I sat there and listened to with extreme attention, but at the same time, I felt my brain, I guess, clicking in or identifying with some of the sounds from the field recordings in connection with just the general ambiance created by the backing electronics here. It's not really depressing either, if I just want to put that out there, even though it might sound like it's depressing, kind of autumn, wet, and this kind of gray sound. It's not uplifting either, in the same way that these seasons or these types of weather patterns can also be not necessarily depressing, but not super fun either. Um, for me, I put this on just when I needed a little downtime to kind of, after doing some work, sit down and clear my head a little bit and recalibrate. And that, I think, mix of sounds and uh, electronics does kind of a nice job of just letting you drift with it a bit. So we'll see if the track decides it wants to play for us or not. Very muted. I mean, it's yeah, but you can hear rain. There's a white noise aspect to it as well. I think that's probably also something I should have mentioned. But very non-confrontational, very unassuming. But a bit hypnotic in its own right. So I know this is not for most. Like I said, it's not something that I will probably go back and revisit anytime soon, if ever. But every once in a while, it is nice to throw these types of albums on and just zone out a little bit. So, and I believe there's some field recordings from, well, the city as well. So it's not just all the natural stuff, but those were both kind of a nice bit of something different. All right, now up here, this next one, we have a compilation album, and we go ahead and get the track loaded up here while I start talking. But basically, started playing already. When I was in high school, I had this phase or a moment when I discovered a German artist named Blumchen, uh, German pop artist. I don't know. Maybe some of you have heard of her, maybe not. I don't know how I discovered her. I don't even remember. But that led me to discovering E Type and a bunch of other musical groups like that, that Euro techno from the late 90s, early 2000s. I would assume that part of it has to do with using programs like Napster and LimeWire back in the early 2000s, where you just downloaded a bunch of weird tracks because that was what was available. And so people in Europe that were offering that up. I don't know. Regardless, I found it. And yeah, I don't know. I kind of loved it. I had my little disc of Euro techno mix where it was, I don't know, probably the names and the artists were incorrect on half of them, but you know, that sound is still good after all these years. And it's clear that it still moves people because right here we have 15 tracks from a label in Ryazan, which is south of Moscow, a few hours by car. And it just is a pure drop of the late 90s, early 2000s, that Euro techno vibe as well. They have it labeled as trance. Never been great with identifying the variations of that, but had me missing sending out text messages P9 on the old Nokia 5110. Like that sound is what you could call it, a blast from the past. This was a bit different though. The screamed vocals in the background are definitely uh, a bit different, but I guess that also stuck out to me too. Um, there are quite a few tracks here, if any of them decide to load, that are. Just gonna jump into. It's just a fun album. It is one you can easily put on, and there's not going to be any moment in its runtime where it feels down. It's always up, always, you know, wanting you to move. So, which is nice, especially in January. I feel like these are the types of albums that you don't typically see this early into the year. But we got it. Oh yeah, the album is called Dreamcore 24. I suppose I should point out. Almost reminiscent of some early Daft Punk in there as well too. So yeah, this is a fun little one. Had actually had a lot of people talking about it too when it came out. I think it came out about 2 weeks ago. But yeah, nice little blast from the past. Okay, I'm gonna click out here for just a second, and I'm gonna reload some of these pages. All right, go back to the infinity screen. Up next, we have Regress by OSSKA and Pasha Technik. Now, Pasha Technik is the first week I did this, I highlighted a single by Bald Emo Boy, and I forget the name of the title track, but somebody pointed out that the title track was a reference, or the title of the track was a reference to a group by the artist, or with the artist Pasha Technik in there. Now, Pasha Technik, honestly, this was bound to happen at some point, so I'm just going to give you the oversimplified and probably not completely ideal analogy, just so that it's out of the way. Pasha Technik is basically Rush's version of Old Dirty Bastard from the Wu-Tang Clan. He is slightly more vulgar, and a lot of his lines are even more non sequitur than ODB's, but everything is just as off the wall with him. And this album is Pasha Technik teaming up with OSSKA, if that's, or OSSKA, I don't know exactly how you pronounce that. This electronic producer, and we've got just 12 tracks of absolutely batshit lyrics over breakbeats and IDM adjacent music here. It is the sound of an AI model deleting its own programming after being asked to analyze Pasha Technik's back catalog of lyrics and make sense of it all, which is, it's a weird album, but it's also kind of um, inviting. That's probably not the right word, but it hooks you a little bit. But Pasha Technik is and his vocal delivery is about as rough as ODB. And then this track right here, Etaleta, the music video for it it's shot on like a 360 camera, so it's warping around itself, and it feels as disorienting as the music. And I think my commentary has been describing it as Lynchian, though it's probably just them having lynch on the brain after recent passing. Hold on. I'm gonna jump ahead.
Йо, холодный квас на усах. Это лето было проебано. У одних в трусах. Ёбано в рот, это заёбы. Йо, холодный квас на усах. Это лето было проебано. У одних в трусах. Ёбано в рот.
You understand Russian. We'll pick up on vulgarity pretty quickly.
Это заёбы.
It's an odd album, and it's not entirely sure. I feel like Pasha Technik is probably going to release something else in the near future, and this feels like maybe just a warm up. But regardless, yeah, I kind of had to talk about it just because again, Pasha Technik is one of those. I know there is a YouTube video in English dedicated to Pasha Technik. So if you search for Pasha Technik, you can probably find it. And I don't remember the name of the channel that I saw. I'm assuming there's probably only one. The video I saw did a pretty good dive into who this character is. So if it's something you're interested in, there is information out there. But we're just going to move on to the next album, which is Чёрная голова by Brom or Brom. I'm assuming Brom, but okay. So more story time. Going back to high school again, except this time it's not Euro techno. So in high school, I had an English teacher, and we would sometimes exchange CDs, and which was always great, right? I was always trying to introduce him, and my friends too, introduce him to kind of newer, I guess typically metal, but also just weird experimental stuff that we had found on Napster and LimeWire, for example, like Pizzicato 5 from Japan. Anyway, that's beside the point. And there was one time he gave me John Zorn's Naked City. And that is an album, which if you haven't heard, go check that out as well. John Zorn, Naked City. It is not at all what I was expecting to listen to. It's just this dissonant, often chaotic jazz, and it felt like the artists were frequently warring with each other. Brom is similar to that. This is a group of free jazz / no jazz musicians from here in Moscow. They've been doing this for over a decade now. And yeah, their latest release is no different. Just like with a lot of stuff I mention here, and I feel like I've already mentioned quite a bit this week, this is not going to be for everyone because, again, jazz is already one of those genres I feel like a lot of people have difficulty with, and free jazz, or as they describe themselves, no jazz, where it's jazz instruments, but they've thrown all of the rules out the window, is definitely going to rub some people the wrong way. Again, realistically, it's the type of thing that I would not necessarily just put on regularly, but I listened to this about a week ago. Yeah, basically a week ago. And last Wednesday, I couldn't quite wrap my head around it. And I gave it a listen yesterday or the day before, and it clicked for me. And it was one of those where you kind of have to, on one level, just let it play, but you do have to pay attention, because if you're not fully paying attention, if you're not paying attention at all, if it's just playing while you're doing something else, it is going to just sound a bit like random noise. Whereas if you're keeping one ear attuned to what's going on, then you'll kind of hear what's going on, that with the artists, how they're playing with each other back and forth. So you're going to have to give it a little bit of the attention that it deserves ultimately. Fantastic artwork too. It is largely also, I will point out, saxophone, bass, and drums. I think that's pretty much it. jazzy enough. But yeah, there we go. There, kind of almost middle finger to the listener a bit. It can hook you. It can pull you in. So if you do like jazz or things adjacent to jazz, then this is definitely worth checking out. It is, like I said, it requires a bit of attention, but it is somewhat rewarding, I would say. So, all right, we're moving away from more experimental stuff into, I guess, what we would call more um, pop. This is technically labeled as rap and hip hop, but yeah. So this is "Broken Crystal Angels" by Trippy Angel. Um, Yeah, I know the artist name and the album name and even the artwork is kind of cringe for anybody who was born before the turn of the millennium, but I guess it is what it is. This is that kind of sad boy rap, but even though it says it's rap, it's more pop and it's a lot of just singing for the most part. And it's not bad. I don't hate it. This is a young artist from Kazakhstan, actually. That a year or two ago, I'm not entirely sure, was just making beats and producing music for himself, um, and then decided to, I guess, start rapping or singing over the top of it. And you can kind of tell that the production and the atmosphere, like the quality of the music, is much higher, and it is the focus of the music, I would say. Um, even though there is auto tune throughout the entire vocals, I would say almost from start to finish, it's not horrible because the synths and the bass, and again, just the production make the vocals almost secondary to the music and the production, which is fine. Um, which is, and honestly, this is great. If you don't know Russian or you don't really care to listen to the words, then this is probably a fine album just in general. But I guess see what tracks I've got listed down. Yeah, this one will work.
Пожалуйста, услышь. Выпиваю твои слезы, слезы цвета ночи. Я ее управляю, моя сука тамагочи. Эта дама меня хочет, хоть и не знакомы. Она даст мне свои
Like the electronics are pushed up ahead of the vocals, 100%.
цвета ночи. Я ее управляю, моя сука тамагочи. Чем нам пора закончить? Всегда много побочек. Во мне скучаешь очень, меня препараты спорт.
So, and it's like that pretty much for the whole album, where it has that, again, kind of melancholic vibe. Again, it's sad boy music, which is fine. I think the artist is early 20s, so go figure. Um, but yeah, musically, there's nothing wrong here, and for somebody who's just kind of getting started, hopefully he pushes on and continues discovering his sound, and hopefully becomes less sad.
Поле знакомое, видишь, как я растворяюсь, не закончив положено. Смотришь мертвыми глазами в мою черную душу. Снова закроешь уши, тебе никто не нужен. На 2 метра погружен, снова взгляд твой чарующий, я обезоружен. В этом цикле ловушек закрою все твои нужды. Просто дай 2 секунды, мы одни в центре Бермуда. Мои розы будут расцветать.
Yeah, don't hate it. It's not something, again, that I'm going to come back to, but it's definitely fine, and I know it is uh, a more and more popular sound these days, so can't ignore the changing of the. Then we're done with rap as well. This is, from here on out, we're looking at rock and metal, and indie. I'm actually going to end with indie, but we'll talk a little bit more about my choice of how to end things when we get closer to it. So, starting out in the rock category, we've got Lieth of Second Hand by Vinovnost, which this is just noisy garage rock that is not afraid to use a synthesizer, which is kind of a nice addition to that sound. Not always though. When the mood needs it, there is a synthesizer, and I dig that. If you enjoyed Ty Segall, Michael Cronin, or the OCs about a decade or so ago, then this is going to be right up your alley. Yeah, honestly, we'll just go with that. Go with the first song because they let you know right from the start what you're getting into. From St. Petersburg, too. I might as well mention that. Almost feels like it could have been in an Apple commercial 15 years ago. And I mean that in a good way. So, garage rock, noisy, fun, just good stuff. All right. Now we move on to something I honestly was not sure about. Again, the first time I listened to it, this happens quite a bit. That's why it's always a good idea to listen to some things more than once. I'm just going to go ahead and get a few of these pages loaded as well. So, what we've got here is an album by a group called Babushka, and the album is called Zagovor Ученых, which is like conspiracy of the scientists. Now, before we talk about the music, we have to talk a little bit about this group because uh, I was really on the fence about this based on the lyrics, but looking at the titles of the tracks, I was also a little bit unsure. This felt like it was a joke. If you can't read Russian, you got ones like uh, webcam, orthodox self defense, uh, conspiracy of the scientists, laughing is a sin, hamster, urine therapy. Like these feel like they're pulling your leg a little bit. And so I did a little digging. It turns out that this group is largely composed of members from another group, which is known as Ensemble Христа Спасителя и Мать Сира Земля. I don't know. I don't know anything about that group. But that group has had numerous songs officially banned in Russia for being quote unquote extremist. And I'm probably sure that the Babushka group has some of the songs that have been banned as well. All of the music is written from the point of view um, of a far right, xenophobic, fundamentalist, orthodox ideologue, which is a lot to take in. But basically, it is just a this music or the lyrics of the music is a form of parody of the types of what it's like these sort of hardcore radical political types. It's just this grotesque parody of a certain segment of the population, which might rub certain people in politics the wrong way. The music itself is pretty solid. It's this mix of industrial and punk and metal, little bit of the electronic elements thrown in there too. It's not like mindless self-indulgence with that kind of rave energy, but you could maybe draw a comparison with that as well. Um, but yeah, it's just kind of absurd, but the music's actually like pretty solid at the same time. So we'll listen to the hamster song.
Что вам всем там надо? Знаете, докопались вы до самых глубин ада. Я найду вас головы, все поотрываю. И на месте хомячка там же закопаю. Беспокойно белый круг, спи, мой друг пушистый. Вы ответите за все, мелкие фашисты. Глубоко.
Yeah, the lyrics are pretty absurd. If you can understand, I don't on their Bandcamp, which is kind of outdated. This new album isn't there. They do have lyrics to some of the songs, but for the most part, you are just kind of on your own. But if you can make them out, you understand Russian, and you can make them out through the music. They're kind of funny, like about a dead hamster, and I don't. It's too difficult. It's not too difficult. It's just too much to explain. It's not worth the time. But even from a musical point of view, it's still kind of fun. So, all right. Up next, we have Razmытие по Gaussu, which I actually looked into this. This is a photo effect where the the name of the group is based on a photo effect. I don't know what it's called in English, where most of the picture is blurry, but there is one part of the shot that is in focus. Just fun fact, I guess. So from time to time, I hear people talk about the return of grunge or the alt rock sound from the 1990s. Um, that kind of nebulous time, or I guess it's more nebulous in my mind, when there really wasn't a clear definition of what those genres maybe were. Like grunge, maybe more so, but like the alt rock of the 90s is a bit more nebulous. Um, the one thing that was clear is that the music itself wasn't clear, right? Distortion was important, big chords were important, everything was loud and kind of edgy, I guess. And that's kind of what we have here. The album Mneme, About Me, um, leans heavy into that sound of the grunge and alt rock of the 90s. But the soul of this music is not, it's not an attempt to replicate that music from the US and the UK of the same time period. There definitely is a lot of the classic Russian rock sound here as well. And the themes feel very much focused on reflecting the not so brightest of lives from here in Russia. But it's not, I wouldn't say, even though the themes of the album might be a bit dark or maybe a bit depressive, the music itself is not. Could this be Bush? Possibly, right? Not that far removed.
Мечтатель в душе, угробленный смыслом, курящий, но только по поводу мыслей. Романтик, убитый любовью обычной, сложным вопросом про мир прозаичный. Удар по печенкам, привет от вселенной.
So, yeah. Obviously, that's not the only sounds. Some of the tracks in the second half of the album are a bit different. There's one that's a bit more, or I should say, is less aggressive, but that's not this one. But again, yeah, a little bit of distortion, a little bit of edge on the guitar.
Все отлично, но есть но. За один день я, блядь, устал от людей. За один день я, блядь, устал от людей.
Okay, moving along, we have Blessed to Kill. I'm just going to keep this short. This is melodic thrash metal. What I mean by that is there are moments of those kind of flashy guitars a la Megadeth, with some soloing and things like that. Megadeth and other groups of their ilk. The English are, or the lyrics are in a kind of a growly, raspy English. So that's a plus for some people, I'm sure. Last week, I mentioned a group from Ekaterinburg, Cyanide Grenade. I would say that this is not quite as good as Cyanide Grenade, but very close. This is still very good. And if you like that sound of Megadeth or that kind of, I guess, melodic thrash sound, then you'll love this album. It's solid from start to finish. I'm just gonna jump into the middle of it. There's the melodic aspect. Even though like the old school Metallica too, maybe. Yeah, maybe that's even a better descriptor. Yeah, I don't know why there's a lot of old school Metallica vibe here. So not sure how I'd like that flew right over my head while listening to this the first time. But so yeah, I guess maybe that's a better way to put it. If you like old school Metallica, as in their first few albums, then this will be perfect for you. So we'll go with that. Okay, up next we have this group ASSP, which we got to talk about this group for a second. I don't have. I'll pull up a picture of them. Um, this group is from St. Petersburg, and they do a mix of new metal, deathcore, and just good old fashioned hardcore. We got 20 minutes, just a nice solid slab of that, just some nice aggression, and it feels like a nice way to bookend January with the first week and really the first day, the first minutes of January, kicking us off with the group Zlo, also from St. Petersburg. Um, and it's maybe not a huge surprise then that this album, which also has a lot of that same energy, has the same guitarist from the band Zlo. Now, I really wish that the band did not dress up like a discount Slipknot. They really should rethink this. This is kind of, I don't know. Looks like what's the Timu or the Wish Slipknot. But and the name ASSP stands for Anti-Social Suicidal Project, which is also kind of a like sure, whatever. But we get past the visuals, we get past the um, naming, and yeah, this goes hard. This is good stuff musically speaking. So yeah, this is the album Поглощенный ненавистью. And what track did I have here? One of the first ones, obviously. Going for a Corey Taylor type thing there, I think, in the background. And musically, they're definitely going for Slipknot also, but Like there is a bit more of that like deathcore, hardcore. Right here. And then you've got a track like T Error. I'm not entirely sure what the deal with this naming convention down here is a bit odd. So T is technically the title. Definitely going for like early. Although that's just hardcore right there. So yeah, I mean, if you like Slipknot, if you like hardcore or deathcore, then this is going to be fine. This is a solid 20 minutes that you'll enjoy yourself with. But all right, we're getting close to the end here. Up next, we have the album Psor by the group Holy Watts, and this is this is definitely a as the group itself describes it, this is a melodic rock ballet, not opera because there's no singing. So it's a rock ballet inspired by Kashi the Immortal from Russian folklore. We have 10 tracks here of this fuzzy stoner doom, which tells a story about a Tsar who was killed, wakes up, I guess, comes to, finds himself in his tomb, obviously still aware that, everything, realizes that he's been murdered, has to come to terms with that, and then he seeks out revenge, as you can see in the track title. It's not quite Mastodon. I mean, obviously, I want to draw a comparison to Crack the Sky. Even with the cover art, feels a little bit like Mastodon cover art from Crack the Sky, but this is definitely the stoner doom type of metal, and it's good stuff. It is good, and they do a pretty good job of, I would say, creating the atmosphere of what they're going for. Kind of a waltzy three, 1, 2, 3. The right time signature for what would be a waltz, I would assume, in Slaughter's Russia. Yeah, there's that pause. And honestly, they do a pretty good job of creating the atmosphere that's appropriate, like I said, for these various emotions: rage, anguish, revenge, as well as like with the ball. And then with prayer here, if I remember correctly, there are elements that feel almost like out of a church. Tap the head. Timestamp, but oh well. Okay, I don't know. I don't know what I'm going on about, but good album. This is a good album. If you like that fuzzy, heavier sound, then you'll love this. If you like something that's just more instrumental in general, then this is also going to be up your alley. So, High on Fire, I suppose. If you like High on Fire, you might enjoy this as well. But okay, moving on to, I guess we'll say it's the last of the metal. We have Starless by Apex Terror. Y- do a little digging around, you're going to see this described as post or atmospheric black metal, which I see all the time in connection with music in Russian. I don't know if people just don't know how properly to describe it. It definitely is post slash atmospheric black metal, but it's more than that. There are English vocals. I'll point that out right away. But this is a lot more mellow death than I think people are giving it credit for. There's a lot of in flames and at the gates in this DNA of this group. But as I've mentioned before, black metal does seem to be the king of the genre here in Russia. So maybe it's just a way for the bands or the label to expand the group's potential market. Um, yeah, it's good. This is just like a solid, really solid, like just this good metal album, just hands down. Um, with black metal and the mellow death elements in there. Um, and a hell of a cover, which we'll get to in a bit. A hell of a cover of "Them Bones" by Alice in Chains, but should check out what the group's normal sound is like. Definitely more in that black metal atmosphere. I will give them credit there. Into the middle of the solo, fantastic. The soloing is, I think, a big part of where I was getting into that mellow death atmosphere. All right, then I have to point out I have to highlight the Alice in Chains cover here because I didn't have the I wasn't paying attention to the song titles while I was listening to this, and this song started playing, and I was listening to it, and just why is this so familiar yet so different? It was ringing a bell, but I just couldn't put my finger on it at first. 'Cause- But if you know the Alice in Chains song, you'll recognize it here. There we go. So yeah, quite a bit of good metal, all things considered, this week. But I think ultimately, in terms of a full album, I'd have to go with Apex Terror as my choice there. Um, but we're gonna move along. We have just a few. We have six left, but we'll get through them quickly. Um, Beslaria, I believe, is how we pronounce the group's name, and their EP Mayak, which means lighthouse. Um, if you remove the vocals from this music, you have heavy, melancholic post rock. If you keep the vocals in, however, you have the exact same thing, just with melancholic, usually female vocals. Although the female vocals usually do add a bit of a folk metal or a folk music edge to the music. So it does it does add another dimension, another layer to everything. To quote how the group themselves describe the music, it is born of Siberian longing. It's the music of unspoken feelings, of the darkness around us and the light inside us. So even though the artwork is a bit dark, um, it's not necessarily going for that vibe. Although melancholy, I guess, is somewhat dark, or it's not dark. I guess it's just sad, gray. Sure. Jump ahead just a bit. Like, it feels like post rock. In let me get the vocals.
Спрячет в метели, я увижу твой свет, луч последний.
So if you like post rock, it is going to be up your alley. I mean, there are vocals. I honestly thought it was going to be post rock just from the cover and just the opening of the song, but it's a nice EP. It is a nice EP, and it'll be interesting to see what the group does. I think based on their page on social media on Vkontakte, it feels like they might be working to release something more in this year. So I guess we'll watch this space. Up next, we have the album Iначе by Sинапсы. This is the debut album by a group which I believe is split between Minsk and Moscow, if I remember correctly. We have 7 tracks here, and they all kind of differ quite a bit in style. It's largely indie, but um, I should clarify that. It's largely indie rock, but even indie rock is such a large category these days that there's a lot of differences within it. And Synapse take full advantage of that. There's also some moments at the beginning and end of this little album where there's a bit of the indie rap thing going on. And even though everything is so different, it does still feel like it fits together into this cohesive whole. There were moments in this album too where I couldn't help but be reminded of the group Cursive, but I can't really explain why that is. There just was something as I was listening to it. It was kind of that feels like Cursive. But and then yeah, right. The indie thing, it kind of goes from that small chamber sound, and then there are times where the sound expands into these big spaces with strings and layers of backing vocals. And I would point out that Нет сигнала, Zima, and Небо молчит, these 3 tracks right here in the middle are just a solid run of them. So we'll just go with the first of the 3 to give you a sample. One of these days. Right, that really quiet, understated indie sound here.
Часто полотнами твоим эскизом служат написанные мною картины. Вот только
We jump ahead a little bit.
пустой конверт, я вроде поднимаю трубку, но сигнала нет. Мой корабль затонул у твоих берегов.
We have more of a, I don't know, like a radio-friendly kind of pop indie rock thing going on here.
Пустой конверт, я вроде поднимаю трубку, но сигнала нет. Мой корабль затонул у твоих берегов. И
And we'll check out another one of these three here in the middle, which are the triple. What's it called? What's it called in bowling when you get 3 strikes in a row? A turkey? I don't know. It's been a long time since I've gone bowling.
Засушливой земли, где отродясь и старый млад, все молит божество воды, позволить расцвести полям. Племя засушливой
Backing vocals,
земли,
the hand drums, a little bit bigger in sound there.
Причина редких облаков.
So, yep, it's good. It is. It's good. And I, like I said, this is the first thing that they have done, so it's good to hear. I'm gonna check, make sure everything's going okay, stream wise. All right, so I just have to check because I can't see the YouTube screen while I'm doing this because it does. If I do, I see this and you see this, and I feel like it's kind of fun, but yeah. Anyway, up next, almost to the end here, we have A1 by Артур Кулаков. It says Post Park here as well. This is, I believe, the lead singer of another group, Post Park. I will be completely honest, I don't know that group. This is Russian indie rock, which is, it's basically just acoustic guitar and bass, but those two instruments pull us in different directions here with the music. The acoustic feels almost like a stripped down version of the Decemberists or Arcade Fire, while the bass clearly wants to go in a post-punk direction, which feels like it should conflict, but instead those two moods find a very interesting middle ground here on this album. Also, I love the artwork. I just have to point that out right now. Like, look, this is fantastic artwork. There's just, it's fantastic. So, and yeah, and just in general, right? Even though there's still something very Russian about this ultimately, and I like the artwork is very Russian too. Okay, so what do we got here? Let's go with the opening track because that was where I first kind of got hooked a little bit, I guess is what we'll say.
Замыленный взгляд от монитора, газетные полосы мне не знакомы. Небо тянет наверх. Привет, ты здесь лучше всех.
This is, I guess, just more classic or traditional. Although I jumped just a little bit too far ahead. There was a little bit of that post-punk thing going on there. I'll try to find that here in another track. Regardless, though, it's maybe Decemberists is not the best. There's probably another group that's just slipping my mind. There's, I think, the guitar, that post-punk sound that I was also getting at. It feels very post-punk. Maybe I'm off the mark there.
между постелью и сном, между моим и твоим домом. Все так знакомо, но мне не подобрать до этого слова. Холодные руки,
The approach to songwriting,
белые плечи. Нам не будет скучно,
very rushed.
хотя бы в этот вечер. И еще один день, и еще одну ночь. Мне нужны твои губы.
Yeah, that's so yeah, A1 by Артур Кулаков, another really solid indie release from this week. It's getting to the point too. I should point out where when I say this week, some of these albums are from a little earlier as well, but I'm pretty sure this one was this week. All right, coming to the last three, and this is actually the last one that is a new album. We'll talk about that in a second. This is Второе дыхание by Chernoburkov. How to talk about this? So this is the first moody, dark pop album with heavy, sinister bass lines, lurking synths, reverbed or jangly guitars in the background, and then lots of layered, airy female vocals. You know the sound. And if you don't, when I put it on, you'll know it immediately when I'm talking about it. Last year, I mentioned in one of the basically the one video I got out where I talked about the best albums of April last year. I mentioned groups like Natural, NTTRL, if I remember that correctly, and Dora, Gail Dorothy with the, oh God, I'm sorry, my memory's slipping right now. Anyway, it has a lot of that same energy. And if it was any indication from last year, there are going to be a lot more releases like this coming in this year. And if they're at the same level as this, then I have no problem with it. It says this is EDM, but I still would say this is very much pop music. So it's just that dark, moody pop music. You know the sound. We've all heard this type of music before. And it's become more and more popular in like the last decade. So I mean, I feel like one track is probably enough to get the idea across, but sample another song too, so you just really understand that it's pretty solid all the way. Solid, not solid. It's a good album all the way through. I don't know. I mean, like, it's not. I don't want to make up some dumb name like goth pop because it's not it at all. But there's definitely that energy there, and I don't know when that dark, moody sound became popular, but they've almost perfected it So good for them. Yeah, this is a good album. Give it a listen all the way through. All right, the two last ones here are kind of special cases. We have X Planet Earth by the group N616 or N616. This is actually a reissue. The album was originally put out 20 years ago. It was the group's first album. This is the first album with additional tracks starting from 12. And you can see the Geigerota is present on quite a few of them. Um, yeah, I honestly would have thought this was a new release. They updated the album art. So if you go back and look at the album art on their Bandcamp, you'll see this is definitely like a much fresher image, which helps. And honestly, the music doesn't feel, it feels old and kind of retro, but I think even in 2005, it would have felt old and retro. So if I hadn't again done a little digging, I probably would not have realized that this is a reissue. So yeah, it's nice to know, I guess, that some sounds never really go out of style. That they always are kind of like that. But I mean, the first track is pretty good indication of what you're getting yourself into. It's industrial metal with a little bit of that cyberpunk retro synthwave sound in there, which is probably why it feels old and fresh at the same time. Could it be from 20 years ago? Absolutely. Could it be from 2025? Absolutely. Could it be from 1995? Realistically, yes. So yeah, I mean, if that's your flavor, then you'll enjoy this. Obviously, the last tracks, which have been tacked on for the anniversary, they're a little bit different. I think that they're a bit newer, but all in all, it's still pretty good. Not pretty good. It's nice. I enjoyed it. It was a throwback to the KMFDM style music of my high school years. So a lot of throwbacks to high school these days, it seems like, or at least this week. All right. And that brings us to the last album, which is a compilation. It is the Chernozem tribute. And I got to talk about this for a little bit. So, a multitude of musical groups and musicians got together to record 26 covers of, well, in honor of a kind of, I guess, something of an underground classic in the Russian rock scene, in the Siberian punk scene as well. Chernozem is, yeah, I had never heard of them. Partly, I think, because again, they're underground. They're from Tyumen, or they were from Tyumen. As far as I can tell, they disbanded in 2014. But the fact that they got together this many different groups and people who, well, in 2025 are interested in paying tribute to them, I mean, that's something. I hadn't heard anything of the group prior to this release. I haven't heard any of their songs. I didn't bother to go hunt them down. But the reason I wanted to bring this up and put this in front of you, I'm not going to recommend any of the tracks or give a rating, although I do have this one liked here. So Chernozem 91, which I get. Okay, fine. We'll play something real fast. We'll see what it sounds like. As a compilation of covers, though, the styles are, even though they're all kind of punk and Russian rock, they are going to vary quite a bit. And it's got like that kind of pop punk sound is probably why. Yeah, that's the reason. There are quite a few other tracks that are nowhere near close to that. The reason I wanted to highlight this is because for people outside of Russia who want to hear, or even people inside Russia, um, who maybe want to hear what is going on. Like, what does Russian rock sound like in all of its various forms? Because, like I said, there are a lot of different styles being presented here. They're all rock or that kind of punk sound, but they're all doing things a little bit differently. And a lot of these groups, honestly, I've never heard of. In fact, I'm sure most of these are quite small or underground in their own right. But if you're in Russia and you're Russian or whatever, or I guess you're really tuned into the Russian music scene and you want to dig into some new groups that you've never heard of before, this might be a good place to start. If you're outside of Russia and you just want to hear what is going on, what does Russian rock sound like? Um, this compilation with the different takes on the group Chornozem is maybe not a bad way to dabble, is what I would say. So the reason I'm highlighting this when I probably otherwise wouldn't is I think it is a nice opportunity for a lot of people to either discover or get more acquainted with the sound of Russian rock and Russian punk, or for people in Russia to maybe discover some smaller groups that they might not otherwise run across. So yeah, that was it. 23 albums we got through today. And it's getting to the point where I'm trying to keep up with all of the new ones that come out each week, but I've already got a bit of a backlog. Um, I'm going to try to push through. I don't Most of my backlog at this point in time is with singles, so I don't really care about that, but the albums are actually getting lost in my playlist with all of the singles on top of it. Um so even though next week we're going to be into February, I will probably still be reaching back and occasionally pulling things up. I am going to try to cut myself off. I'm going to make notes as to which albums were released in January, and then after like the first week of February, just not go back to them. For example, if I missed it, I missed it. When it comes to singles, I still am updating the playlist on Spotify, but it's already getting a little out of control. There's already like 75 tracks on there. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to split that playlist into genres as well. I'm going to do a rock and a metal one. I'm going to do an electronic one, and I will do a pop and indie playlist as well. And then that way you can just check out by genre, because people who want to listen to pop and indie music don't want to hear like grind and death metal pop up in the middle of it, which we've gotten to the point now where there's enough tracks that I can make that transition and it will be logical. So, as always, I will put the links to all the albums in the video description here in a little bit. And then and the links to the playlists on Spotify once I get those. I'll put just the regular playlist up for now, and then when I have um, the individual playlists put together, I will update that as well. But yeah, this is it. That's the end of January. I have listened to probably 100 albums so far. I'm pretty sure over the last 4 weeks, I have discussed about 75 to 80 of them. And there are quite a few, well, I guess about one out of every five or one out of every four, which I do not talk about for various reasons. So yeah, it's been quite a bit. And what I can say is, even though these are all live and the live videos then go up to the YouTube channel, this has been nice because now it'll be a lot easier for me to sit down and actually make a short video about like the actual really good albums from January. I'm going to have to find like a free afternoon to sit down and re-listen to them and get my thoughts put together. But I've already got my list kind of drawn up, so that makes things a lot easier. I'll be back on Sunday as usual doing the news. Good news is that over the last week and a half, there really hasn't been any major developments about news here in Russia. But obviously, we still have a few days before Sunday, so things could happen between now and then. I think realistically, though, I'll be able to cover all of the main topics from 2 weeks in a single evening on Sunday. And then who knows, maybe I'll do a roundup video too of all the news for January. I don't know. Well, we'll see how ambitious. I already have a 3-page text for an upcoming video that I need to actually like sit down and film. Which, but anyway, yeah, we'll wrap it up there. I hope everyone has a good evening or a good afternoon. And if I see you on Sunday, I see you on Sunday. Otherwise, I'll be back here next Wednesday. And we will be already talking about some of the first albums of February. So until then, everyone have a good week and a good weekend. And you'll hear from me either on Sunday or next Wednesday. Take care.